Two voices from two crosses on the same hill. The first is a voice you would expect. It is the voice of a man being tortured to death, and it is full of rage, snarling, spitting, hurling the crowd's mockery back out of his own pain. Save yourself, it says, and save us. The second voice you would not expect at all. It comes from the other side of the hill, from another dying man, and it is not raging. It is cracked and spent and almost gone, and what it says is only 3 words: remember me. Between those 2 crosses is a third, and the man on it, bleeding, condemned, hours from death, looking by every measure like a man whose story is over, is about to answer that second voice, not as a fellow victim, as a king. This is the story of the man who had nothing left and no time left to get it, and who was promised paradise anyway. And it is the story of why that promise is either the best news you have ever heard, or a warning you cannot afford to mishear. To understand what happened on that hill, you have to be willing to look hard at the thing itself, not to look away from it, the way we usually do. Because the mercy at the end of this story only means what it should mean if you have first felt the full weight of where these men were. So begin with the cross, not the polished symbol it became, the object. Crucifixion was not, first of all, a way of killing people. Rome had faster ways to do that. Crucifixion was a way of terrifying people. It was a public statement mounted along a road, and the statement was simple. This is what Rome can do to you, and there is nothing you can do about it. It was reserved for the people Rome most wanted to make an example of: rebels, runaway slaves, the lowest criminals, and it was designed in every detail for the maximum of shame and the maximum of slow suffering. The shame came first. A condemned man was stripped. He was lifted up deliberately, to a height where he could not be missed, where every traveler on the road, every passerby, everyone who had ever known him would see him exposed, helpless, and finished. Rome wanted him seen. The whole point was to be seen. And then the suffering, which was unhurried on purpose. A crucified man did not, as a rule, die quickly of his wounds. He died over many hours of exhaustion, of the simple, grinding impossibility of holding himself up to breathe. It was a death with no dignity in it and no speed in it, and Rome had engineered it that way because a fast death would not have served the lesson. That is the object. That is what waited at the end of the road for the men in this story. And on one particular morning, outside the city of Jerusalem, 3 men were walked up that road to it. The place was called Golgotha, the place of the skull, a low, bare rise just outside the city wall, close enough to the road that the traffic of the whole city would pass it. 2 of the 3 men led there that morning were criminals. The Gospel of Luke calls them simply that: evildoers. Matthew and Mark use a word that can mean robbers or bandits or violent rebels against Rome. The Gospels do not tell us exactly what these 2 had done, but they tell us this much, and we should not rush past it. Whatever it was, it had been enough to put a man on a Roman cross. These were not the wrongly accused. By the measure of their own world, and as we will hear, by their own admission, they were guilty men, and the sentence was just. The 3rd man was Jesus of Nazareth. They crucified them there, on that rise in a row, Jesus in the middle, 1 criminal on his right and 1 on his left. And over Jesus' head they fixed a sign naming the charge against him: the King of the Jews. And then the watching began, and the watching turned very quickly to mockery. It is one of the hardest things in the Gospels to sit with, not the cruelty of the soldiers who were strangers doing a job, but the cruelty of the crowd. because a crowd had gathered along that road the way crowds did to watch men die, and they did not watch in silence. The religious rulers stood and sneered up at the middle cross. He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is really God's chosen one. The soldiers took it up as a game. If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. And the ordinary passers-by, the people going in and out of the city, threw their own insults up at him as they went. And here is the detail this story turns on, and the Gospels do not spare us from it. The two criminals, both of them, joined in. Not one of them, both. Matthew says it plainly, and so does Mark. The men who were crucified with him also reviled him. So picture the hill in those first hours. 3 men dying, and 2 of the 3 in their own agony, spending what breath they had to mock the third. The criminal on the one side and the criminal on the other were, at the start, exactly the same. Same sentence, same pain, same jeering. Hold that picture. Because everything that makes this story worth telling is the fact that, over the hours that followed, it stopped being true. The hours on a cross are long, and they are not the same for every man. For the criminal on the one side, the hours did not change anything. He went on raging, and we should try to understand him before we judge him, because his rage is deeply human. He was in agony. He was afraid. He was furious at a world that had brought him here, and the only thing he had left, the only power still in his reach, was the power to lash out. So he lashed out. And at some point in those hours, his mockery of the man in the middle sharpened into something specific. He had heard the crowd call this Jesus the Christ, God's chosen one, and so he turned that word into a weapon. "Aren't you the Christ?" he sneered. "Save yourself and us." Listen to what he is actually asking, because it matters. He is not asking to be forgiven. He is not asking to be changed. He is asking to be taken down. He wants rescue with no repentance in it. He wants the cross gone and himself exactly as he is set free. It is a demand, not a prayer. Prove yourself. Do something for me. Get me out of this. And when nothing happens, the demand just curdles back into mockery. That is the man on the one side. He wanted out. He never once wanted in. But something different was happening, slowly, on the other side. The second criminal had gone quiet. The jeering had simply run out of him, and in the silence where the jeering had been, something else began. And the Gospels do not give us the words of it, so we will not invent them, but we can see its shape in what the man says later. It is the shape of a reckoning. Because a cross, for all its horror, does one thing with terrible clarity. It ends every distraction. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to chase, nothing left to manage. There is only the man and his life, and the short and shrinking distance to the end of it. And in that stripped-down clarity, this second man seems to have looked, finely and honestly, at the whole of the life behind him. The road he had walked, the things he had done, the people somewhere back down the years that those things had cost, and the plain fact that all of it had led, with a kind of grim logic, exactly here, and he could not fix any of it. That is the wall this man hit, and it is the center of the whole story, so do not move past it quickly. He could not fix it. There was no climbing down off that cross and starting over. There was no making it right. There was no good deed left that he could do. No restitution he could pay. No better man he could slowly become over long years. Because there were no long years. There were hours. He had run his whole life down to its very last page, and the page was a Roman cross, and there was nothing he could do about any of it. Most of us will go a long way to avoid ever feeling that wall. This man could not avoid it. It had been driven through his hands, and it was there, with nothing left and no way to earn anything, that he turned his head and looked at the man on the middle cross. He had been watching Jesus for hours. He had heard how this man answered the mockery, and it was not the way he himself had answered anything, not with curses flung back down at the crowd. And as the second criminal watched, something he could not have named was working its way through him. And then, at midday, the light went wrong. It was noon. The sun should have been at its highest and hardest. Instead, the Gospel of Luke tells us, a darkness came over the whole land, and it held for 3 hours. The middle of the day turned to a strange, shadowed dusk over the hill, and the 3 crosses, and the unsettled, quieting crowd. And it was out of that darkness that the second criminal finally spoke. Not at first to Jesus, to the other criminal, to the man still raging across the hill. He had heard enough of it. "Don't you even fear God?" he said, "seeing you are under the same condemnation?" It is the first true thing anyone on that hill had said all day. "We are dying," he is telling the other man. "We are hours from standing before God. How are you spending those hours?" And then he says, the thing almost no one ever says. He tells the truth about himself, out loud, with no excuse attached to it. "And we indeed, justly," he said, "for we receive the due reward for our deeds. We deserve this." He does not say it for effect. He says it because, at last, he has stopped lying, to the crowd, to the other criminal, to himself. He is a guilty man, and he finally says so. And then, in the same breath, in the same dark, he says the thing that no one else on Golgotha had the eyes to see. "But this man," he said, looking toward the middle cross, "has done nothing wrong." Stop on that. Of every voice on that hill that day, the rulers, the soldiers, the crowd, the other criminal, the one voice that spoke the truth about Jesus of Nazareth belonged to a convicted criminal, dying for his own crimes in the dark. Everyone with status and freedom and a clear conscience looked at Jesus and saw a fraud. The guilty man on the cross looked at him and saw innocence. The guilty man saw clearly. That is not an accident. It is, in a way, the whole gospel in miniature. That it is so often the ones who have finally stopped pretending who become able, at last, to see. And having seen that much, the thief was not finished. Because to see that Jesus was innocent was only the beginning of what this man, somehow, in the dark, had come to believe. He gathered what breath he had, and on a cross, breath is the one currency you are always running out of. And he turned his face to the man in the middle, and he spoke to him directly. "Lord," he said, "remember me when you come into your kingdom." We have to slow all the way down here, because there is more packed into that one sentence than into anything else said on that hill. Look first at how small the request is. He does not ask to be taken down. He does not ask to be spared or healed or rescued the way the other criminal demanded. He asks for one thing, and it is almost nothing. Just remember me. When you come into your kingdom, do not forget that I was here. That is all. It is the request of a man who knows he has no standing to ask for anything larger. But now look at what that small request is standing on. Look at what this man has to believe in order to say it at all. He is looking at a human being who is visibly dying, a man stripped, beaten, nailed up, mocked, hours from a corpse's stillness. Every appearance screams that this man's story is ending here, in failure, and the thief looks at all of that and calls him Lord, and speaks without a flicker of doubt of when, not if when, this dying man will come into his kingdom. He is certain that the man beside him is a king, that death is not going to stop him, that on the far side of this horror there is a kingdom with a throne in it, and the man on the middle cross will be the one sitting on it. There is more clear-eyed faith in that one sentence than anyone else on that hill had shown all day. The men who had followed Jesus for 3 years had by now scattered. They had run. And here, in the dark, a criminal hours from death looked at the worst-looking moment in the history of the world and said, "You are a king, and I would like, please, to be remembered in your kingdom." And the man on the middle cross turned his head. He had been mocked all day and had not answered the mockers. But this he answered. And he did not answer it the way one fellow sufferer answers another. He answered it the way a king answers a petition brought before his throne. "Assuredly I tell you," he said, and even those first words carry weight. They are the words of a man with the authority to settle a matter. "Today, you will be with me in paradise." Take that promise one piece at a time, because the thief asked for so little and was handed so much. He had asked to be remembered someday, at some distant future coming of the kingdom. And Jesus says, "Today." Not someday, not after some long waiting, some proving period, some passage of years the thief did not have. Today, before the light of this very day is gone, it will be done. He had asked only to be remembered, to be a name kept in mind. And Jesus says, "You will be with me," not recalled from a distance, present, together. The thief asked to be a thought in the king's memory, and the king promised him his own company and the place. Paradise. To a first-century ear, that word carried the picture of a garden, the garden of God, the place of the righteous dead, the restored nearness to God that the very first pages of the Bible had lost. That is where Jesus tells this man he is going. Not nowhere, not into the dark. Into the garden with him today. A whole eternity, promised in a single sentence, to a man who an hour before had been cursing, and who even now had nothing at all in his hands to pay for any of it. The dark still lay over the hill. The dying was not over. Nothing about the hours ahead was made easy. But something in the thief had changed entirely, and the Gospels let us feel it without spelling it out. The same nails, the same slow, terrible work of breathing, the same hill. But a different man was doing the dying now. A man who had been, in the space of a few sentences in the dark, handed a future. His agony had not lessened. His despair had simply ended. And beside him, Jesus went on suffering, the hours not shortened, the cup not taken away, for him, for anyone. Until at last, around the 9th hour, the strange darkness began to lift. And the day moved toward its end, and toward the moment soon, when the soldiers would come to break the criminal's legs and finish what Rome had begun. So let us say plainly what happened on that hill, because it is worth saying plainly. A guilty man went to paradise that day. A man who, by his own open admission, deserved a criminal's execution. And he went there having done not one thing to earn it. Think honestly about everything he did not have time to do. He was never baptized. He never paid back a single person he had wronged. He never gave to the poor, never prayed a prayer in a quiet room, never sat in a synagogue a changed man, never lived even one day of the better life. He had no record of good deeds to set against his record of bad ones, and no time left to start one. All he had, in the end, was a few hours, a turning of the heart, and one sentence of faith spoken into the dark. And it was enough. Now, that is either going to sound to you like the best news you have ever heard, or it is going to sound too easy. So let us be clear about what it means. and just as clear about what it does not. What it means is that salvation was never something a person could earn, and the cross of the thief proves it at the very outer edge. We carry, most of us, a quiet arithmetic in the back of the mind, a sense that we are building a case, that our decent days are being weighed against our worse ones, that we are, on balance, hoping to come out ahead. The thief had no such case. His arithmetic was hopeless, and he knew it. And he was saved anyway, not because the scales finally tipped, but because he stopped trusting the scales altogether and turned with empty hands to Christ. That is not a loophole in the gospel. That is the gospel shown at its clearest, on a hill, with nothing else in the frame to distract you from it. Heaven is a gift. It is received. It is never ever earned. The thief is the proof, and it means something for the person who is sure it is too late for them, the one who has wasted it, or broken it, or wandered too far, and has done that quiet math, and concluded that whatever door there once was, it closed a long time ago behind them. Hear the hill. The door was open to a convicted criminal with hours to live. It did not close. While there is breath, there is the turning that the thief made, and the one he turned to has not changed. But, and this is the honest word, and the story would not be telling you the truth if it left this out, that mercy is a reason to turn now. Not later. It is assurance for the desperate. It was never meant as a plan. Look again at the other cross. There was a second criminal on that hill, and the same Jesus was within the sound of his voice, and the same mercy hung in the same air, and he did not take it. He ran out of his hours still raging. No one is promised a clear, lucid final moment in which to get it right. The thief was not given his cross as a strategy for the rest of us to copy. Wait until the end, then turn. He was given it as a door thrown open, and an open door is something you walk through. It is not something you lean against, meaning to, until the light is gone. This whole series has been, in a way, one story told over and over. The story of a person who met Jesus and could not stay the same. The tax collector up the tree. The woman the crowd wanted to stone. The friend who had denied him 3 times. And here, at the very edge of everything, is the most extreme version of it. A criminal on a cross with nothing in his hands at all, and the undeserved mercy still found him and still was enough. So here is the question the hill leaves with you. You may believe you are too far gone for it. You may, just as easily, believe your own decent record will be enough to carry you. The thief is the answer to both. He had no record at all. What he had was a savior, close enough to hear him, and a few words of breath, and the sense to spend them on the only thing that finally mattered. By the time the light went out over Golgotha that evening, one of the men on that hill was with Jesus in paradise. It was not the one who had done the most with his life. It was the one who, at the very last, turned